Welcome back. Today is chapter 32, in which Aunt Kitty leads me from the plague. Now, the last thing that we heard was Aunt Kitty was going on a mission to Baltimore. Baltimore is in Maryland. It's over on the east coast of the United States, with Hattie Lawton, a new person working at the detective agency, okay? Remember they had a little argument and stuff, and it seems like Aunt Kitty still wants Nell to go to an orphanage, okay? But we know that they do care about each other and stuff. So anyways, here we go. "Wake up, Nell," came my aunt's voice the next morning. "You need to dress as quickly as possible. Get moving." I sat up groggily in my bed and tried to make sense of what I was hearing. Aunt Kitty stood beside me in her black wool coat. Mrs. Wigginbottom's jowly face peered over my aunt's shoulder, looking red and weepy as she pressed a white hanky into her nose. "Good heavens, she's not feverish too, is she, Mrs. Warren? Oh, the angel of death is upon us." I don't remember what my Mrs. Wigginbottom voice is. "She is not feverish, Mrs. Wigginbottom, but I will be if you do not stop your infernal wailing," snapped my aunt. "Now, if you please get out of this room so the child can dress." Once Mrs. Wigginbottom closed the door, I threw off my covers, stared at Aunt Kitty for some sort of explanation. Today was the day she was to depart for Baltimore with Mr. Pinkerton and the other detectives, and it was the day I was to start investigating a new living arrangement. "I'll fetch your heavy coat and gloves now. You throw on your checkered gown. We've got to get a move on if we're going to make the train." Wait a second. "I'm not going to Baltimore with you, Aunt Kitty. Remember, you already sold my soul to Mrs. Wigginbottom." Aunt Kitty bristled at my words, but I didn't pay her any mind. She'd hurt me deeply yesterday, and I wasn't about to forgive or forget. "The plans have changed, Nell. I want you coming with me. Now move swiftly." "You seemed pretty dead set on leaving me behind yesterday," I said, still sitting where I was on the bed. I smoothed down my nightshirt and wiggled my toes with my thick wool socks. I was in no hurry to do her bidding. "What in the world could possibly have changed your mind this morning?" "Measles. Down the hall from us. Now please get into your dress now before it's too late." I stood up and padded over to the wooden wardrobe that held our clothes, but my mind was in a bit of shock. I'd read in the newspapers about cholera, typhoid, and all sorts of other plagues that afflicted our city. I wasn't so sure about measles. Aunt Kitty seemed able to read my mind, and as I shimmied into my dress, she stuffed stockings and unmentionables, underwear, into my carpet bag and explained what was happening at Mrs. Wigginbottom's boarding house. "They discovered the body of that gentleman who resides at the end of our hallway just a few hours ago." "Mr. Hummer?" I shouted. "No, the other one." "Mr. Slammer? Is he dead?" "Mind your manners, Nell," she scolded, handing me a comb and pointing towards the wash basin, meaning go comb your hair. "Yes, the unfortunate soul has succumbed. That means he died. And that sweet Mrs. Nash downstairs is burning with fever too. It does not look good for her either, I fear. And so I feel that I cannot leave you amid such contagion. While my latest case may involve peril, I believe it would be far more dangerous for you to remain here." She didn't have to say another word. With a few quick swipes of that comb, I was done with my preparations. I jumped into my boots, grabbed my bag and the heavy wool coat, and we were on our way to the train depot. All right, couple interesting things here. Mrs. Wigginbottom came into the room holding a handkerchief and kind of saying like, "Oh, she's got the fever." So that was definitely because of the measles. Something interesting, I would never have been able to do this before as a teacher, and that is kind of measles, typhoid, cholera. All of these things are kind of these big sicknesses, diseases of the past, and it's kind of actually something that we're experiencing right now. This is actually kind of a modern version of what measles and typhoid did during their time. I'm not 100% sure. I'm not a disease expert. I'd have to do a little bit more research on it, but just the idea of a pretty bad sickness coming to town. And you know, nowadays, so you guys know, most of you get a shot. You get a measles shot when you're young, okay? All right, here we go. "What am I to do with this brooch?" I asked, fumbling with a silly circular pin of blue silk ribbon the size of my fist. "Affix it to my bonnet?" A brooch is like a pin, okay? This is to be worn on your gown, Aunt Kitty explained, slowly turning an identical one in her hands and scowling. The Baltimore ladies are showing their sympathies with the slave-owning states by pinning these blue cockades to their breasts. It's the emblem of secession. Okay, so that means that the ladies in Baltimore, okay, are wearing these blue pins. It said it was blue, right? A blue pin, and it means that they are like agreeing with the southern states that seceded, that left the United States of America to form their own, the United States of America to form their own confederacy. Okay? I stared across to her and blinked. What was that? Oh, I should have waited. What was that word, secession? Had she said succession as in one thing following another, or cessation meaning something to cease? Another one for the vocabulary list, I see, Nell, my aunt said with a sigh, the railroad tracks clacking below our feet as we rolled east across Indiana. Secession means the Southerners are breaking away, or seceding from our present union of 33 states to form their own confederacy of sorts. Back then, 33 states in the United States, not the 50 that we have today. 34, I corrected, still feeling a little snippy since our argument about her leaving me behind. Kansas announced statehood just last month. Nice work. We know she reads the newspaper, right? So maybe she's really on top of all this information. I turned the word secession around on my tongue for a while, then tossed the pen aside and picked up my Chicago Press and Tribune. The papers were full of stories about these Southern fire eaters, as they called themselves. From what I understood, these rebels wanted to put Mr. Lincoln in a grave before he could even recite the oath of office, so he's not even the president yet. There is talk of bloodshed in the news, I said. They're saying the South will take up guns against the North in war. They're threatening to kill Mr. Lincoln himself. So I've heard, Aunt Kitty said, her voice tight. She turned her gaze out the windows, watching the colorless winter landscape roll by. I tried to offer a more cheerful bit of news. Listen to this, Aunt Kitty. Mr. Lincoln has taken off by train from Illinois just like us, only he's heading for the White House in Washington, I said, peering up from the newspaper. Perhaps our paths will intersect, and we'll get to see how tall the man is in real life. Aunt Kitty told me to put the newspaper down and get ready. But I wanted to know why we were bothering with a trek to Baltimore, Maryland. For some ordinary old case when we really needed to be in South Carolina or Mississippi, where treason was happening on a grand scale, where people were doing things against the government. You should know how tall Abraham Lincoln is if you watch the Brain Pop videos. Anyways, here we go. Pay attention, Aunt Kitty said peevishly, tugging the newspaper from my hands and setting it on the bench beside me. We need to prepare for what's ahead. Baltimore is a hotbed. Lots going on. Okay. Mr. Pinkerton's detective agency has been hired to keep tabs on the railroad lines in and out of Baltimore and any plans to destroy them. But I suspect there is something more evil in the wind. I will not say more of it, but know that Baltimore aligns itself with the South. It is full of angry men and women ready to die for their cause and their way of life. If we are found out now, it could turn quite ugly. Aunt Kitty was no dramatist, so when she got worked up, I knew I should be on guard. I sat up a little straighter and listened closely as she went on. So Aunt Kitty's not one to overstate things or cause a lot of drama or blow something out of proportion. She's very realist. So the fact that she's doing this means Nell's really taking her seriously. Our steps cannot falter. We cannot fail in this mission. Cannot. Now hear me well. While I do not want to bring you on such a dangerous mission, you can be of help to me on this case after all, Nell. We shall pose as Southern sisters this time, hailing from Montgomery, Alabama. I am Mrs. Barley, and you are my sister, Miss Matilda Maddox. I believe that with those ears of yours, you can listen for any dark plans as well as I can. Matilda, I protested. What kind of name is Matilda? It makes me sound bulky. Aunt Kitty snapped up the newspaper and whacked me on the shoulder with it. Enough childness, Nell. I don't have time for it. Now I'll need you to change into your disguise at the next stop this train makes, while I meet with Mr. Pinkerton and the other detectives in the adjoining rail car. I expect you to look sharp upon my return. And she marched off in such a dander. I imagined smoke trailing behind her. I leaned back on the bench in the rattling car, alone and shivering. The trees through the window were spindly and bare, and a thin layer of snow whitened the landscape as far as my eye could see. There was an etching of frost forming along the corner of the window, the glass doing little to keep the bitter fingers of winter, ooh, I like that, from finding their way inside our rail car. Oh my gosh, I love it. So frost is forming along the corners of the windows, and the glass is thin and is doing little to keep the bitter fingers of winter from finding their way inside. Oh, I like it. I couldn't help but feel the whole country was in the grip of the same chill. Was the United States tearing apart just as Mr. Lincoln had warned about a house divided? I picked up the blue pin again and turned it in my fingers, shuddering to think of what Gemma would do if she saw me mixing among Baltimore's secessionists. But it seemed we were going undercover right into the hornet's nest itself. Perhaps Gemma might be proud to know we were spying on the haters of freedom. As Aunt Kitty had directed, at the first stop I left the train and donned the costume she'd packed in my bag, a gorgeous gown of deep green taffeta and black lace that I'd seen at the Pinkerton office of Mr. Bangs so many months ago. It fit me perfectly, sullied only by the despicable blue pin I pinned to my breast. I twisted my hair into a low knot, then carefully climbed back aboard the train and stepped down the aisle. A familiar voice, deep and gravely, interrupted my thoughts. "Good afternoon, young lady. Delightful weather we're having for February, wouldn't you say?" It was the playful Detective Webster was standing before me. Only this time, he was clean-shaven and in a new winter suit. I braced for one of his jokes, but he seemed earnest. I turned to look behind me to see who the young lady might be. Perhaps another rider my age. But there was no one else in the long aisle of the rail car but me. "Pleased to make your acquaintance," he continued formally, taking my green-gloved hand in his and bowing like a real gentleman until his head nearly touched my knuckle. I yanked my hand from him immediately and jabbed at his rib cage with an affectionate but firm punch. Detective Webster jumped back as if I'd poked him with a hot stick. "I beg pardon, miss." "Do you not know me, Mr. Webster?" I asked, unsure whether he was making me the butt of his joke. He was always teasing, but this time his voice sounded sincere. "Jiminy Christmas, Nell Warren?" He whispered. "Jiminy Christmas, Nell Warren?" he whispered. His expression confounded, I could swear. I saw a blush spreading like wildfire from out of his starched collar, up his neck and engulfing his cheeks. "It cannot be. I took you for a lady." That was kind of tricky. I had a hard time reading it because I actually wasn't sure if he was kidding or maybe if like they were already in disguise and he was already acting. I was a little confused by that, but it looks like she's just looking so grown up that he didn't even recognize her in her outfit. Okay. All right. That's the end of the chapter. Chapter 33 is tomorrow. I like that. Interesting that measles is the reason that she actually got to go on the case. And now the chapter title makes sense, in which Aunt Kitty leads me from the plague. All right. See you next time.